Good afternoon, guys. How's everyone doing this glorious afternoon? It has turned into a lovely sunny day, and it's been a long time coming. Welcome to my channel, guys, Motocross Mania TV. Now, I'm gonna have to try and break this video down into a few different parts because I've got quite a lot to say. Now, I put something on my community post earlier on about me with my banger racing days and my hot rod racing days at Wimbledon Stadium and Arena Essex. And my best mate was a guy called Nutty Norman, and he was from Enfield Lock on an estate called Carter Hatch Road, just off of Carter Hatch Road. And what a small world, you know. The last time I see Norman was over 22 years ago. And when I put something on my community post about banger racing, a guy called Dean Smith come forward and said, yeah, I remember Norman very well. And yeah, it's just a blast from the past. What a small world, Dean, eh? Don't even remember me, Dean, but my name's Joey Barnett. I lived over just off of Ordnance Road in Enfield Lock, Bideford Road actually, and I used to drive a breakdown truck. Now, come from southwest London originally, but moved over to Enfield, North London in the early 90s when I first met Nutty Norman. Yeah, that's definitely Nutty Norman. Long hair, no teeth, married to Debbie. He had 2 kids, and I'm very sad to hear that his missus, Debbie, Debbie Gardner, her name, has passed away. I didn't know that. What I do know is recently one of Nutty Norman's son's mates come forward and messaged me and said that Lee, I think his name's Lee, he's doing really well, and he's got his own fencing company. So the last time I see Nutty Norman, was 2005. I was over in Dartford, up there on a site in Dartford, going to buy a Transit, a truck, and Norman come out of one of the trailers and said, hello, Joe, how you doing? I ain't seen him for donkey's years. But that's the last time I see Norman. He moved away. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what happened to Debbie. It shocked me, really, and it's upset me to hear that Debbie passed away. I didn't know. I know she had a brother from Tottenham called Lee Gardner. He got a life sentence for the murder of road rage, Lee. We used to write to each other when we was in jail, both doing big lumps of bird together. We crossed paths a few times when I was in Swellside. Know him very well. But yeah, what a small world. What a small world, Dean. Do you remember the Wolf brothers, Darren Wolf and Dean Wolf? They done banger racing too. My track was Arena Essex and Wimbledon Stadium. We also used to race at Swaffham, Kings Lynn, Lambs Farm. My licence was PRI, which means Promoter Raceway International. And when I moved over to North London, I lived opposite Teddy Gumbel. That's when I first met all the Gumbels. Joey Gumbel, married to Sally Gumbel, and his dad was Siddy Gumbel, which was right next door to him. I was on that little horseshoe road with all the boys up there. And that's when I very first met Norman. So Norman got me into banger racing, basically, and I joined a team which Norman owned, and the team was called the North London Nutters, and we had big letters up our side of our car called NTAN, and what that stand for was Never Trust a Nutter. Now, we used to paint our cars red and yellow, and I used to race Granadas, Cortinas, Datsun Bluebirds, do you remember them? Even Larders. But yeah, I had Rover 110s, Rover P100s, all the lot we used to race at Arena Essex. A very fast track, a very daunting track. But that was my first track where I learned how to race. But we used to paint our cars, me and Nutty Norman, and there was, I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 of us in a team. But after a few months of being in a team, it did gather momentum, and we started a nice little team together, me and Norman. God, it's a blast from my past, it really is. And yeah, man, I've got a little bit of PTSD, so it did affect me when when I heard that Norman's Mrs. Debbie passed away. She was the salt of the earth, the most kindest, loveliest, loyalist, loveliest lady you could ever come across. Long blonde hair, very family orientated, really nice. And on the estate where Norman lived, just off of Carteret Lane, he lived in a block, and used to sell a bit of thingy, and he used to look after every single person in that block, especially women and children. He was a really good bloke, Norman was. So if you're watching this video, Norman, get in touch with me, because it's been a long time, a long time, 2005. But yeah, when I first moved over to North London, it was in the early 90s, probably 1992. And from there, I moved back to Southwest London, where I was born and brought up, and like an idiot, got a big long sentence. Not long after landing back in South London, I got a big long sentence. So now I wish that I would have stayed over with all the boys over in North London. But yeah, going back onto the banger racing video, which I said I'm going to do. As I said, we was over in Arena Essex, and we used to paint our cars red and yellow, and there was a team there called the Suicide Squad. Now, they painted their cars red and yellow too, and they asked us if we could change our colours of our cars. It's a bit like gang warfare, you know, when they wear scarves and bandanas, there's certain colours. We used to do that with our cars, so we refused to do that. So basically, the Suicide Squad was such a big team, they had hundreds and hundreds of drivers all across the country, and every time we went out on the track in our colours, red and yellow, the same as them, they targeted us. They used to pick us up on a straight and follow us through, right down the whole of the straight into the iron coving in the bend. And every time we used to see one of them, vice versa, we used to do the same thing. You know, one of our mates, a guy called Frank Brinkley, his nickname was called Cuckus. He was a traveller. He was from Enfield, and he was from Harlow, actually. All his people was on Harlow. He was in our team, painted red and yellow, North London Nutters. And one of the Suicide Squad picked him up. He was in a Rover 110. I must slow down a bit. One of them picked him up, followed him through into the iron coving, and he was in a Granada, a Mark II Granada with a 3 litre in it, Frank, my mate. And it had an L-shaped water tank which run along the bulkhead of your motor and went right the way down to your wing, because obviously you couldn't have radiators, so we had to have big massive L-shaped tanks made up. We had all our roll bars and all our battery tray, our fuel tank, our water tank. We had all that welded up from a guy over in Romford who used to specialise in welding and used to do all of our motors. But yeah, this day what I'm talking about, one of the Suicide Squad picked Frank up, followed him down the straight, went on, basically was up his arse, toe down to the metal, and my mate, obviously Frank, went on his ankles to try and break up, but you know, the car behind me had a boost up, and I think it was a stage 1 or stage 2 head on it. It was a big powerful racing engine, so that's what we used to do. We used to take our engines out of the bangers each time and put them into the next one and the next one and the next one, and that was our race engines. I spent over $3,000 on my engine, and that's going back in the day. It was a lot of money. I had a 2 litre Pinto with I think it was a Mark IV or Mark V block, a 2005, a 205 block on it. It was like shit off a shovel. But yeah, going back to this day at Arena Essex, one of them picked Frank up, followed him down the straight, up his arse, put him into the iron coving right on the bend. And Frank was a very big guy. It was probably about 22 stone. And, you know, you had to have all your doors bolted up. You had to have steel plates up the side of your doors. And you wasn't allowed to hit the driver's door. That was always a rule. And if you did, you got chucked off there and then. It was a dangerous sport. Whiplash galore. Yeah, I had whiplash every time I went out. But yeah, he followed Frank into the iron coving on the top of the bend at the right at the top left-hand corner of Arena Essex. And the water pipe, which went onto the L-shaped tank, had split. And there was a hole just up by his clutch and his accelerator where he used to run the pipes, the overflow pipes, and he couldn't get out of the motor, and the water come pouring into him, boiling hot water after we've been racing for about 3 or 4 hours. You can imagine how hot the water was. Frank couldn't get out of the motor in time because he was so big. You know, he had to climb out through the windscreen, but the water was running onto his legs, onto his shins, onto his left shin especially. And he got scalded right the way down to the bone. And I mean down to the bone. They had to stop the race immediately. An helicopter had to land, and he had to be flown off to hospital. That's how bad the crashes were. It was a fast track, and I'll tell you what, you could smell the petrol, the rubber, the burning, and the adrenaline was on another level. You know, I used to have all my family going there watching me. It was great times. It really was. Yeah, man. Dean Smith, a big shout out to you, Dean. You might remember me now. I had a ponytail too. My name's Joey Barnett, but I changed my name on here called Motocross Mania TV because obviously I like motocross. But yeah, we had another time we had a big, massive fight in the pits with the Suicide Squad, and on another occasion because we wouldn't change the colours of our cars again. After they asked us so many times, you know, we told them to change their colours, although they had their cars painted their colour way before us. We wasn't going to budge, and it turned out that we had it was a bloke. One of the main blokes in the Suicide Squad was called Simon Capon, and he had a fight with one of my mates called Darren Weaver. Darren Weaver was from Tottenham, North London. So a big shout out to everyone across North London, by the way. Hope you're all doing well up there. But yeah, he had a fight with Simon Capon in the pits, and everyone got involved. So the whole Suicide Squad run over, all of our team run over, and literally it was like a spaghetti western in the pits. All the police come, helicopters landed, ambulances, fire engines. It was absolute chaos. And the fight just went on and on and on. It must have went on for what felt like about half hour, but it weren't. It's probably 5 minutes. But yeah, we was hitting each other with monkey wrenches, spanners, wheel braces, hammers. It was all going off. It really was going off. And it got really dangerous. It really did get dangerous because every time we went back to the track on the same with the same colours, we got targeted, but we still didn't budge. In the end, after probably a few months, we said to them that we'd change because we had red bonnets and we had yellow at the back, and they had exactly the same colour as the squad. So Nutty Norman had a little arrangement with one of the bosses of the Suicide Squad and come to a mutual ground, and we said we'd change the colours of our car to yellow at the front and red at the back. So then we got on great. We got on like house on fires. After the fight, we really got on well. And then the Suicide Squad wanted us, me and Nutty Norman and a few of my team, to join the squad. But we didn't want to let our team down. We didn't want to let the North London Nutters down, so we refused that. But yeah, after that, we all got on like an house on fire. And we used to race up and down the country, we really did. We was notorious for it. There was a breakers yard over in Tottenham called, his name was Johnny Brentwood or something like that. And he used to give us all the cars, all the Granadas. He used to ring Norman up and say, right, I've got a Granada, or I've got a Rover, I've got a Banger, you can come and take. But these cars couldn't be rotten because, you know, big hits, we was having big crashes. So you can imagine if you go out banger racing in a stone rotten car, you know, you could potentially lose your life. So we made sure that our cars were up to scratch, no rust on them, no rot on them. Basically, they had to be MOT'd for us to race them. And there was only a few ways which you could acquire these cars, and that was unfortunately by stealing them. And that's what stopped me in the end from racing, because I kept getting arrested for stealing different cars. I actually went to prison for it, for stealing cars. It's all down to banger racing. But yeah, moved away. I moved away from North London in the late 90s, I'd say. So I moved there around 92, and I moved away in the late 90s. Yeah, it was the late 90s, because when I went back to Southwest London, you know, it was around 1998 that I got that 12-year sentence. What a wreck. What a mistake going back to South London, going back to my old stomping ground. That's what took me down. It really was, moving away from North London. Hope you enjoy my content, guys. I'll be back at you in a bit. Peace.